You're listening to the Love Unplugged podcast, episode 64. I've always believed that self-love is the foundation to every important relationship in your life. So if you're finding yourself in breakup after breakup, or maybe you're giving 110% while losing yourself completely in a relationship, you may have some inner work to do to bring your most confident, fun-loving, powerful self to your love life, as my guest would say. Today, we are diving deep into what the signs are, what we commonly experience because I have also, and what we can do to attract the relationship and the love that we are truly worthy of. So without further ado, let's get to it. Hey there, I'm your host, Jessica Fergon, and I am passionate about doing the inner work needed to reach your goals. Let me be your guide as we navigate all the fears and insecurities that surface when it's time to step outside of your comfort zone. Along with my knowledgeable guests and industry experts, I'm here to teach you how to reawaken your life purpose and passion and create the steps to turn your intentions into action. Ultimately, my goal is to empower you to rise above those blocks holding you back and start living a life that you are worthy and deserving of. So come on, it's time to slow down, find a comfy spot with your favorite organic tea, and get inspired. Thank you for tuning in to the Love Unplugged podcast. Hello, loves. Today I am joined by the lovely Amy Young, a life coach, speaker, and podcaster. If you're looking for real talk about love, whether it's self-love or relationships, she's someone to turn to. Through her own personal experience and journey, she teaches others how to experience the love that you're worthy and deserving of. So welcome, Amy. I am so honored to have you as my guest, and I'm so excited to learn all about your story and advice. But before we start, for those that don't know you yet, I would love for you to share a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you so much for having me. This is such a treat. So yeah, I mean, you kind of hit the nails on the head, like in terms of the basics. I started working with single women in 2014 after a couple years of making YouTube videos. I started my channel when I was living in New York. My background is actually in performance. So I was an actor, I was a stand-up comic, I did improv, and I started my YouTube channel just totally as like a creative outlet for me. And then over the years of just like making a ton of videos and getting to know my, then like very small but very engaged audience, it ended up, that I had a lot to say about dating and relationships, which I didn't necessarily know at the time, but in retrospect makes total sense because as soon as I was sort of dating age, I joke that I was just completely boy crazy and sort of like romance and relationship obsessed. And I had a very kind of colorful dating history and had a lot of experiences to draw from, like I joke a lot of the time when I'm writing posts or, doing videos that I'm like, there's a lot of stuff that I had to learn the hard way in the love department that I'm happy to share with my online community so that maybe they don't have to make the same mistakes that I did. So I'm really always, as a coach or a speaker or a content creator or any of those things, I'm always speaking mostly from, my own experience. And now through years of working with so many women from all over the world, all walks of life, all ages, there are these common themes that I just see among so many of us. And yeah, just wanting to help everyone have the kind of love life and life, that they're really seeking.
I love that. Yeah. That's so perfect.
Yeah.
Now, before we jump in, I have to make this comment. So I was on your Instagram and I was looking at your story highlights, and the one on quarantine totally got me today because this whole week I've just been so over COVID.
I know.
And I've been feeling like crap, like you shouldn't really say you're just so over it and blah, blah, blah. On Instagram and all that stuff. You have to be like upbeat and positive. But I was just like, yes, I'm like, it is okay to be like so done with it.
Yeah. Like just to admit, like this sucks.
It sucks.
Like this just sucks. This isn't fun. Yeah. And it's funny because I keep kind of ebbing and flowing where I'll have a few days or something where I'm like, oh, I'm in like the quarantine groove. Like, like I think I'm getting the hang of this. And then something like an anvil hits and I'm just like, nope, stir crazy. I'm done with this. Get me out of here. So I totally feel you. I'm glad that resonated.
That was perfect.
Good.
All right. So let's start at the beginning with that breakup that started you on your self-love journey. Mm-hmm. So what was the relationship like?
Well, that specific relationship, it was sort of, I describe it as the moment of like, never again. Like, I'm never doing this again, because the relationship that it was really like a cumulative volume of breakups, that kind of like, I tend to say to people, it takes us a while to kind of get hip to our own BS. You know what I mean? Like, there's a lot of ways in which we will, for me, I was always going to relationships, not consciously in the beginning, but unconsciously, like, to feel loved or to feel worthy or to feel whole. Like, I was like, I am just happier and feel better and feel more confident and like myself more. And I feel like my life is going better if I'm in a relationship. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of just one of the common stories, I think, that we're told culturally and in terms of our society, is just like, oh, being in a relationship is preferred over being single. And especially as a woman, like, being in a relationship is like really, really important, like, and to the point where, I work with women who are single, who at this point have internalized this idea, like, something's just wrong with me because I'm single, or like, I can't seem to quote unquote make this relationship work. So I was just going from relationship to relationship to relationship. And I started working with a therapist when I was in my early 20s, who enlightened me to the fact that I had very codependent tendencies, right?
Mm-hmm.
She recommended that I read Codependent No More by Melody Beattie, which is like the codependency Bible. And I resonated with every word on every page and was like, oh no, I am definitely codependent. And that was a big wake up call, that helped me see my patterns and the types of men that I was drawn to and the types of relationships that I was attracted to, which were generally pretty kind of chaotic and roller coastery. Like, there would be really, really high highs, really low lows. We would kind of like get committed and dive in really, really fast. I would feel like, so dependent on this person and the relationship for me to just feel good and feel okay, and put a lot of pressure on those connections. And, eventually, once I started seeing through a lot of those patterns, so what always happens, we kind of wake up, and it would be great if right away we were just like, oh, I don't want to do things that way anymore. I'm going to change it right now. But usually it takes some time. It's like we have to circle that block a few times. So when I landed in this one relationship in my mid-20s, and it was actually a significant relationship I was in before I moved out of New York, before I started my coaching business, it was actually like a better fit. Like, this person didn't have like major issues. It wasn't like the type of thing where I was dating them because I felt like I could help him or save him, which was a pattern that I had. Things weren't really chaotic or roller coastery. There were just problems in the relationship that I really didn't want to fully acknowledge, like obvious problems and things that were going to make it unworkable that I couldn't really see. And I really gave 125% of myself to like making it work. Like, I was the person who was putting in so much of the effort and trying to get them on board and being like, we can work on this, we can make this happen. And when he ended up, breaking up with me because he was just like, this doesn't work, and I was like, we can make it work. I'm like hanging on for dear life. I remember having this really, clear, crystal, like lightning bolt kind of moment of like, you are never doing this again, because like, even though I had done a lot of work on myself, or even though I could see how, that relationship was like a step up from like a total dumpster fire relationship, that there were good aspects to it, I still had let myself get sucked into this unhealthy codependent dynamic where I was so entrenched in making it work. And this person being who I wanted them to be, like, I talk a lot about dating potential, or just waiting and wanting so badly for someone to change, or trying to change myself to make the relationship work and fit, like putting the relationship above everything else. And I was like, you don't get to do that anymore. Like, I had a tough little conversation with myself of like, you're not doing this anymore. You can't keep going down this road. Like, you really have to get to the root of your issues with you, and get to a place in your life where you feel, more or less, it's not ever going to be perfect, but whole and kind of fulfilled on your own, or you're just going to keep looking for, some boyfriend Band-Aid to kind of mask this wound, or this sort of issue. Right. So that was like a big wake up call moment. And then, when I started working with women and making more and more YouTube content about it and building it more on my platform online, that was truthfully like part of my own healing process, because it was such a powerful way to also hold myself accountable to what I was, teaching. And so, yeah, it's been a journey, man. It's never over.
No, it's definitely not
Yeah.
something that you just get to and you're kind of done with it.
I know. Wouldn't that be great?
Yes. What
Yeah.
was your self-love practice like? Like, what was that relationship you had with yourself at that time? What did that look like?
At the time when I was kind of starting to be like, okay, I got to work on me, like when that was really, yeah. So I put sort of two pillars in place where I was like, I need to figure out how to actually take care of myself, like what that actually means to me. Because I keep wanting this other person to tend to me and look out for my needs and consider me and like, make me a priority. And I was like, no, that's my job, right? Like I have to make me a priority every day and I have to look out for myself first and foremost. So self-care was really effing huge. And then I was like, I need some goals. I was like, I need some really clear direction, because if I just keep making my relationships my whole life, that's just a form of avoidance, right? Like self-avoidance. Like there was like an emptiness and a sadness that I felt really directionless at the time. Even though I had been pursuing acting and living in New York, and honestly, like my 20s were friggin' phenomenal. I feel like they were exactly what your 20s ought to be. There was a lot of stuff that I didn't want to acknowledge that wasn't working for me professionally, or in terms of like lifestyle wise, or my finances being in order. Like there was stuff that I knew I needed to clean up. And setting some really clear goals for myself professionally and financially, and in terms of the type of life I wanted to lead, and being like, okay, I have to hold myself accountable to those goals and practice showing up for that stuff every single day. That was a huge form of self-love for me, right? Instead of wishing and waiting and wanting that someone else would maybe enter my life and like help me figure out my finances, or help me like get my shit together professionally, or whatever it might be. I was like, I have to assume that role and kind of self-partner right now. And whatever it is that I'm looking for from a guy or from a boyfriend or a partner, like how do I start to show up for myself in that way? So in the day-to-day, yeah, it really was like making sure simple stuff like, okay, I'm eating 3 meals. I'm getting really good sleep. Am I exercising? Am I, meditating? Am I spending time with good people? Am I like keeping my drinking in check, like things of really being like, how do I kind of nurture and nourish myself? And also, what are my priorities? What's really important to me at this phase of my life? And putting that kind of front and center. And when I was planning my week and carving out, how I wanted to spend my time.
Amazing. When you decided that you needed to start working on yourself, did you take a time out from relationships in general? Did you like tell yourself, okay, you know what, for the next 2 years, no more relationships with partners, etc. I'm going to focus on myself. What was that like?
So I totally set that intention. And of course, this like dreamy guy entered the picture like 3 weeks later. You know what I mean? Like I was like, okay, no boys, like I'm taking a break. I'm working on me. And then I met this like, amazing guy. And we dated later. We ended up being friends first, which was a really kind of like needed, necessary thing. But yeah, I've gone through different stages and phases of sort of taking a time out, and being like, all right, there's some stuff I really need to look at for me. Something that I see a lot in the women that I work with is, well, it can kind of go both ways, right? Like either we'll set that intention for ourselves and then, yeah, like some guy strolls in and we throw it out the window and it's like, well, how's that really going to work? That's like repeating that same pattern. On the other side of the spectrum, I also know women and have worked with women who, and I've fallen into this pattern as well of being like, okay, I'm just going to do me until I'm quote unquote like fixed, until like I'm healed and I'm in this perfect place. And then I'll be able to kind of put myself back there in the dating scene. And it's just one of those things where I don't think it's ever that black and white. I think we can learn a lot from really having to face ourselves and be with ourselves and self-partner. I think we can also learn a lot by, being on a self-love journey and also being committed to the dating process in an intentional, thoughtful way. So I've I've danced on all ends of the spectrum, and I think there's totally a time and a place to create those hard boundaries, and it can be super valuable to do that. You learn a lot when you take relationships off the table, especially when, like for me, relationships were something that I used, and guys were something that I used to not have to face myself and deal with my own stuff. Right? Like I used relationships to help me just like cope with my own anxiety or sense of worthlessness or sense of loneliness. It was like a little security blanket that I got to hang on to. Yeah. So then strategically being like, okay, we're going to take away this security blanket. I have to deal with all of my insecurities now. And that's such a powerful thing to step into. So yeah, I think, it can be a really courageous, awesome option when it feels like it's needed.
Totally.
Yeah.
Why do you think that we lose ourselves in relationships? Like, what is the root of that behavior? Because I know it's happened to me in the past. I mean, I've had relationships in the past where I give like 2 billion% to them, and like I'm on the back burner, and it's all about them. And then at the end, I just feel like I've really lost connection with myself. I don't really even know what my values or my priorities or anything are anymore. It's all them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's such a combination of things. I mean, one, we can look at, all right, well, who and what were like your models for relationship growing up, right? Like the sort of like attachment psychology theory, which sort of dictates that, how we were tended to and taken care of very, very early on in life, and the relationships that were presented to us, either from our parents or what we were exposed to, even just like in the media, that'll dictate a lot of how we relate to relationships, right? And unfortunately, most people I know didn't have the best models for relationship health, right? And when you look at like mainstream media or fairy tales or the stories that were told about love, it's a lot of really like convoluted messaging, around like, all you need is love, and love, love heals all. And, if you really love someone, then like, yeah, you can't like eat, sleep, breathe without them. And, so I think there's a lot of covert and overt messaging that just encourages us to prioritize relationships above all else in our lives. Right. Yeah. I also think, I wish I could remember the exact quote. There's this amazing quote from Bethany Webster, who's sort of the leading teacher on what she's termed the mother wound, which is really kind of like this collective wound and crisis that we're having on both an individual level and in terms of our society. In that we really disempower the feminine, we disempower women, we misunderstand motherhood, and it creates a lot of confusion about how we really bond and connect and relate to others. But she talks really blatantly that women are sort of trained to prioritize connection above everything else. So if me being the term I use is full flavored self, like me having all of my opinions and upholding all of my values and owning all of my worth, if that rocks the boat, and again, it might not even be obvious, but if in some way I get the feeling that me being all of me and having all my feelings and all my opinions and all of these, like icky human needs that I have, like, gosh darn it, what's the matter with me? If me being that version of me creates problems for our relationship or threatens the connection that we have or makes someone else, not want to choose me, right? Like I know I work with so many women who've had the experience of being told that they were too much, like you're too sensitive, you're too emotional, I can't count on you to be like rational, or you ask for too much. If I feel like my too muchness is a threat to our connection, then I will sort of water myself down. Mm-hmm. Right. So I'll water myself down. I'll kind of like, probably not consciously, but unconsciously just make myself sort of small and start negating my own needs or keeping my opinions to myself or not sharing, my true feelings with you, because I don't want any of that to threaten our connection. And I definitely don't want any of like who I really am to boil to the surface and then cause you to not choose me or for you to abandon me or reject me. So I think a lot of us, the way that we adapt to that fear is by really abandoning ourselves before someone else can, right? Like, it's like before you can walk away, I will just slowly start to siphon off and dismiss and dissociate from the parts of myself that I think you might not choose, or the parts of myself that I've been led to believe are unlovable. Either, because of like that early upbringing that I had and the messages I got about that maybe made it hard for me, to be loved or to be a quote unquote like good girl, whatever that might mean. And also, maybe what I've experienced from past relationships too. Like, if one of your initial love relationships, ended really abruptly and because someone, didn't fully accept some part of you, then we as human beings, like, we kind of code that in ourselves and we're like, I better not bring that to the table next time. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So I think there's just so many kind of ways in which we're kind of taught and trained to do that. And it's coming from a well-meaning place inside each of us, in that it's coming from this place of wanting to preserve connection, right? And prioritize that at all costs. But if me preserving and maintaining connection comes at the cost of like self-sacrifice, like if I have to pretend to be someone else, or I have to let go of some like integral part of me in order to satisfy you or meet the needs of this relationship, then that's probably not the right relationship for me to be trying to preserve and maintain. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I've always felt that relationship, the one that you have with yourself, it sets the tone for everything else in your life. So based on your experience of where you were at that time, did you see it impact any other areas?
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, I'm with you 100%. And I also I love that phrase, right? How you do one thing is how you do everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I was very much, codependency is largely a chronic habit of self-avoidance and self-neglect, right? Like, you're taught to put everyone else above yourself. Like, your needs are more important than my needs. What you want is more important than what I want. How you feel is more important than what I feel. So I will ignore myself and even kind of shape shift or kind of chameleon myself to just please you and be what or who I think you need to be, in order for this relationship to work, in order for you to be happy. Because if you're happy, then I'm happy. Right. And I saw this, there was a reason why every customer service job I ever had, I completely excelled at. There was a reason why I was a star bartender. Or why, one of the restaurant jobs I had in New York, within less than 6 months, I was promoted to a manager. And it's because I'm so good at knowing what other people need. I'm so good at reading people and being able to pick up on these subtle nuances of, ooh, this is what this person is feeling, or this is the kind of day this person had, really highly empathetic, and sort of could attune myself to other people really easily because I wanted to make sure that they were okay. Mm-hmm. So I will show up as the kind of bartender I think you want me to be, right? Or I will be a star employee because I know that will make you, my boss, my manager, happy. It will make your life easier, So, and there's ways in which that is awesome. There's ways in which I can look at that and see even also where that made me a great coach or a really great business owner, or paid my bills when I was working off tips, But at the same time, if that is a strength, if I do have this strength in being able to read people and meet other people's needs and maybe put my own on the back burner for a time being, to preserve this prioritized connection or this job that I have to do, that might be a strength, but it can also be a huge weakness. And that I can, like you described, right, in those relationship experiences, forego my own values, put my own health or my own needs on so much on the back burner that I wake up one day and I'm just a bottle of resentment, where I'm you know what, I fucking hate this job actually. Because all I do is I give and I give and I give and I show up and I show up, and I'm always the person who picks up the extra shift or works the extra hour or stays late to help clean up, to try and make everyone else happy. And then when is it my turn? Mm-hmm. Right. And that's a problem, because if I'm feeling victimized by something, if I feel well, when are these people going to start looking out for me? The only reason why I'm asking myself that is because I have not been looking out for myself.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think that there's so many ways in which, habits of self-neglect or people pleasing or feeling like you have to caregive or take care of others, it can just like run rampant and cause all kinds of issues in our everyday lives outside of, intimate relationships as well.
Definitely. And I love that you brought that up because I think so many experience the same thoughts. I mean, I've had them in the past as well, where I'm very much, the same type where I give everything to everybody else but my needs. And
Mm-hmm.
I know I need like to grow and to, progress on my self-love journey. It goes right off the list, right? Like that's not a priority. And I've always kind of felt in the past, I'm like, well, how come I have to always do this? Or how come I'm always having to show up? And how come nobody else is? And how come, but I'm doing it to myself,
I know.
which is even more frustrating.
It's the most frustrating. It's like the worst moment to be like, oh, I did this to me. And there's nothing worse than like, oh, I did this to me again. Like,
damn it.
Like, oh, I thought that I like it's like a weed, that you pull out in one area of your life and you're like, yeah, I pulled that weed. And then like it pops up in some other relationship or with some other family member, with like a professional dynamic. And you're like, God damn it, I thought that we solved that. And it's always very kind of fascinating. Just the coping mechanisms that we develop, because that's really what it is. Like, we're always just trying to keep ourselves safe. That's it, and some of us have learned to keep ourselves safe and to gain approval or feel loved in some less helpful ways. So it's just kind of unraveling that knot most of the time.
Totally agree. Yeah. Now, I want to go back to your self-love journey. So we know what you needed in your life at that point, but what were the steps that you took? What were the boundaries that you put in place? And then overall, now that you're at this place in life now, following all of that and everything you've experienced, what have you learned? Like, what are some key learnings that were just like light bulb moments through that journey where you're just like, wow, I can't believe like that's happened and how far I've come? Or
yeah, such a great question. One of the things that I put in place for myself, which has become kind of like a pillar of my coaching practice too, is this routine for daily self-care that I call the Sacred Six. And these were and still are 6 daily tasks or activities that I sort of assigned myself every day that were just small acts of self-care, like small promises that I could keep to myself that felt like I was looking out for me and tending to me, right? So in the beginning, like my initial iteration of self-care was just like, okay, am I drinking 8 glasses of water a day? Did I eat breakfast? Did I move in some way, right? Whether it was like, did I go to a yoga class? Did I go for a walk? Did I go to kickboxing? Did I meditate? Did I do something creative? Because at that time, YouTube was such a passion project for me. And I was like, okay, if I want to turn this into something, I'm going to have to show up for it every day. So I was like, did you work on a video? Did you edit? Did you upload something? Did you write down video ideas? I just assembled this list, like this daily to-do list that had nothing to do with anything except me feeling like I was paying attention to myself. Mm-hmm. And it seems small kind of when I talk about it, but it was completely miraculous and life-changing. And I've seen it be miraculous and life-changing for my clients now too, where there's something about really actively keeping those small promises to yourself, even if it is just, like, okay, I'm going to make my bed in the morning, or I'm going to read before bedtime instead of, just like scrolling on my phone mindlessly, whatever small thing that you can kind of sign up for that really feels like this is me taking care of myself today. And doing that consistently over time, you just start to feel way better about yourself. Like you know what I mean? It's like, I started to feel like, ooh, like I can look after myself and I do know what I need. And then it became kind of like a language that I could speak with myself, where if I felt off or if I felt weird or if I was having a crappy day, I could be like, well, did you hydrate today? Like, did you get enough sleep? Did you eat breakfast? Did you work out? Like, oh, look, like my Sacred Six kind of fell off, or maybe I need to adjust them in some way. Like there's something else that I need to put on this list now to really nurture and care for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that, I've continued to fall back on and let evolve over the years with me. That's just like never failed me. If there's any point where I'm like, I feel lost, I feel confused, I don't know what's the matter, I'm like, oh, I probably need a new sacred six. Like there's probably new stuff in my life that needs to get prioritized in terms of self-care. And, the other big thing I would just say, going back to kind of what I was saying about goals, like really paying close attention to where I was putting my time. Time is, our one like non-renewable resource that we're handed in our lives. And when I looked at how I was spending the majority of my time, a lot of it was just sort of mindless. Like I was like, oh, I can watch 6 hours of Real Housewives this weekend. I don't have anything going on. Oh, I can like go meet my girlfriend for mimosas in the middle of the day because whatever, I don't, I can get drunk at 1 o'clock. Like who really cares, or like I just wasn't being very thoughtful or intentional about how I was spending my time.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, it just wasn't really producing any results in my life,
Mm-hmm.
like it just wasn't moving the needle on any of the stuff that I wanted to achieve or wanted to do. So I remember when I started having to look at my calendar and be like, what do I have to say no to? Like, okay, no, I'm sorry, I can't go have drinks with you because I'm working on a video this afternoon. I remember the first time like saying that to someone, I felt like, oh, like this is such like a dorky thing, because this is just like Amy's YouTube channel, like, well, whatever, she's working on her videos, like no one else thought anything of it, but to me it was something important. So putting up boundaries, whether it was with friends, whether it was with, a guy who was asking me out, like protecting my time and being really intentional and holding myself to, nope, I'm going, to a kickboxing class at 8 a.m. tomorrow. So I can't go out after work and grab drinks with my coworkers, like that sort of tough stuff. That was the most really self-loving thing that I could do for myself at that time. And I think that that's carried over in a lot of ways. I think the one difference, the thing that I learned over the years and I've had to really soften into, especially in the past year, is that those were muscles that I really needed to flex, like holding myself super accountable, prioritizing my business, prioritizing self-care, being really like kind of rigid with myself, for a period of like, okay, no. Like you really have to take care of yourself in this like actionable, clear way. And now in the past year, realizing that, oh, like I've sort of mastered that way of doing things. I'm really good at getting shit done. I'm really good at like getting my butt out the door for a workout. I'm super like, I can, hold myself accountable, no problem. What I've had to kind of ease into now, because it's always, let me back up for a second. Anytime that we're trying to adjust a pattern of behavior or instill a new habit in our lives, what almost always happens is like, let's say I have really weak boundaries, for example, right? Meaning like I don't do a good job of communicating what my needs are or clarifying for people in my life, like what works or doesn't work in the context of our relationship. What almost always happens is once we start practicing the new habit or the new thing, we swing to the other end of the spectrum where we will become like boundaries, like ninjas, right? Where we're just like, I know exactly what works for me, doesn't work for me. And I can say no problem. And I'm totally like evicting people pleasing from my life. And I'm never going to be that person anymore. So we go from being like super sloppy to super rigid. And then what generally happens over time is we realize like, oh, what actually works better is if I can kind of land somewhere in the middle, right? Where I can recognize like, I know how to set boundaries. I've practiced that. I've mastered that skill. And because I know how to do it really well, I can trust that I can soften or relax around it a little bit. And that, I'll still know how to do that. And that's something for me that I've had to lean into in terms of expanding my business, especially, trusting myself that I'm like, I can get stuff done. I can prioritize my own needs. Where can I like relax a little bit more, and like give myself more time off or prioritize things that aren't my business or that aren't goal related, whether it's just like goofing off on a Sunday afternoon because like, why the heck not? Maybe I want to watch the Bravo marathon and that's okay. That's not a bad thing. But easing up on some of those skills that I had to strengthen.
I love that.
Mm-hmm.
That's so great.
Oh,
and I love that you talked about, identifying what your priorities are, what are your values, and looking at the way that you're spending your time and determining what items or what things that you're doing that don't fall in line with what you're actually wanting to achieve in your life.
Mm-hmm.
That's such a good advice.
Yeah. And it's like, it's hard to do that kind of inventory on yourself,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
like it's hard to really recognize like, oh, I'm not living in alignment with the person that I want to be or what is most important to me. Like, eek, and no one else can fix that for you. Like, we have to have a good hard look in the mirror and be like, all right, I have to step up to the plate. So it's not always fun, but it's better than the alternative in my experience.
Totally.
Yeah.
Did you have any key learnings or, gold nuggets of wisdom that you've accumulated throughout your journey?
Oh my God, like 1,000,001, like just
What are your top like
1,000,001. I think one of them, we sort of already joked about, but like, it's never over. It's never, ever, 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 ever over. I think we're always just in a constant state of personal evolution and getting to know ourselves in new ways. And in my experience, just when you think that you've like climbed the mountain, right? And it's like, oh my God, like I'm exactly, like I set out this goal to be in this place or to have this kind of relationship or to, like cross this imaginary finish line. You will cross the finish line, climb the mountain, check the box. And then it's like, oh my God, there's a whole new mountain for me to climb. Or there's like suddenly I'm like running a whole new race that I didn't realize that there's a whole new set of issues or ways in which I'm really being asked to grow. And that is thrilling and infuriating. And I think especially, because so much of how personal growth is like marketed and positioned to us, I think that we all do carry around this unconscious idea that like, well, someday I'll get to this point where I am just like a perfect, finished, polished product. Like I'll just, I won't have any more problems and everything will be great. And I just don't, I don't think that that's true. I don't think that that's what life is designed for. I think it's designed to kind of constantly be showing us where our edges are and where we can grow and how we can support ourselves. And, I'm going through a huge growth spurt in my life right now where my entire life looks very different than it did a year ago. And if you told me a year ago, hey, this is where you're going to be and this is what your life is going to look like and this is going to look like and this is all the stuff that's going to change, I probably would have been like, not so sure about any of that. So yeah, we're always learning and growing and evolving. Yeah. I think another really big one is just about like being really willing to kind of question everything. To like question what you've been taught, question what you've been told, question the beliefs that you have about yourself, the beliefs that you have about the world, anything that you kind of hold in your life as like, oh, well, that's just the way things are, right? Or that's just how people are. Or this is just the way I am. I think that's some of the most powerful stuff that we can challenge ourselves on and go, well, is that really true that that's just the way that things are? Or that's just how I am as a person. And is that how I want things to be? Is this the person that I want to be? I'm such a proponent of really, like questioning ruthlessly, just the stuff that we maybe unconsciously hold as true that may or may not be serving us or supporting us in the life that we want to live or the type of human or the person that we want to be in the world. And being really willing to like go to bat for what you believe or what you kind of hold true, even if it doesn't align with what a bunch of other people in your life might believe or hold true.
I love that so much. And I love that you brought that up. That's such a good point. A lot of people definitely just kind of go with the flow and they don't really look really deeply into maybe beliefs that they have about themselves or other things, and they don't really question things. I think it's so important to constantly look at those things and reevaluate where we're at in life at that stage.
Agreed.
So I want to talk about your program, Single and Slaying It. Sounds like an amazing program. What does the program entail? What can someone expect from, jumping on and enrolling in it?
So Single and Slaying It was my signature group coaching program that I ran for a number of years before now, transitioning it to a digital course format. And it's an 8-week, or it's designed as an 8-week program. Although, now that it's a self-study course, people could feasibly go through all the modules in a week. But I really recommend that people take their time, because it's a very experiential program. Like the assignments and weekly work that I offer for my clients in it it's really about actually making real changes. And that was kind of, that's kind of how I've always been as a coach is, we can stay in our heads or look at our issues or, kind of talk about stuff forever. But unless you're really changing your behavior, your life isn't really gonna change in the ways that you want it to. The results in our lives are always born out of our actions and what we do or what we don't do. So Single and Slaying It is it's really a program about building a lot of what I call the foundational skills of healthy relationships. And that does start, like you said, with the relationship that we have with ourselves. So there's sort of these two, I call them holy grail guidelines, because I don't like rules, but these are guidelines that I will suggest to the women in that program that have worked really well for my clients. The first of which being, these are the only rules you need for your dating life. Okay, ladies. So number 1, don't go to the grocery store when you're hungry. Number 2, don't go to the grocery store without a list. So what I really mean by that is, what happens when we go to the grocery store and we're hungry? I don't know about you, but I tend to get really distracted by delicious looking things that probably aren't good for me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just famished and confused and wandering up and down aisles and not even really sure what I'm doing there. It's not an efficient process, right? And I typically come home with a lot of stuff that I don't really need.
Mm-hmm.
And in our dating lives, this can roll out the exact same way. If I'm not approaching my dating life from a place of personal fulfillment and feeling like I'm working on my self-love or working on my self-worth or putting myself first, then we will unconsciously be trying to fill these holes of loneliness or unworthiness or dissatisfaction with a partner, with a relationship, which tends to not produce great results and is honestly just not fair to any human being that you might invite into your life. That's putting a lot of pressure on another person to be hey, I don't feel that great about myself and I don't really like where my life is at, but you want to come in and make me feel a lot better. So the first half of the program is all about feeding yourself first, enacting a lot of what I talked about here, establishing what your goals and desires are right now, getting into practice with a really good self-care routine. The first thing that I make everyone do is they have to start a practice of dating themselves and taking themselves on what I call table for one adventures, thinking about what's the stuff in your life that you deprioritize or tell yourself you can't do because you're single, and hello, put yourself first, self partner, take yourself out, treat yourself well, say yes to what life has to offer. And then the second part of the program, is all about kind of knowing what it is that you need, right? Don't go to the grocery store without a list. You need to have some criteria that you are aware of, either from past experience or knowing yourself the way that you do now. What is it that I'm really looking for in a partner? What are my boundaries when it comes to relationships, right? Really understanding your relationship with rejection and helping yourself really kind of fill up your own tank and not feel like you're so dependent on other people needing you or wanting you or saying yes to you. So that really streamlines the process as well. And I see a lot of women who are really afraid to raise the bar in terms of what they want in their love lives, because it feels well, I'm already not getting really great options. So if I uphold my boundaries or if I raise my standards, then I don't feel like there's going to be anyone. But it's actually the opposite. As long as we have sort of weak, flimsy boundaries, or we aren't willing to put ourselves first or be really clear about what it is that we're looking for, you kind of just are opening the door for anything and everything to walk through. And anyone's probably going to look kind of good to you at that point. So again, holding ourselves accountable to the type of person that we want to be in a relationship, the kind of relationship that we really envision and imagine for ourselves, and being able to really attract and align with the type of partner who's going to be able to fulfill that for us. So it's hundreds of women have graduated from Single and Slaying It over the years, and I've just seen such cool things happen. And it's not the kind of program where the end goal is oh, let's get you a boyfriend as quickly as humanly possible. Like, that's just not the kind of coach I am. Right? Like, and the women that I work with are usually the ones who are like, the relationship piece is important to me, but I got to clean up my own stuff first. Right. And Single and Slaying It is for that woman who like has, like I said, like circled that block enough times of realizing you don't want to keep making the same mistakes or falling into the same patterns or attracting the same type of guy. You want to really do that foundational work with yourself so that that becomes impossible for you to do, right? Where you can't fall into those same traps or keep circling that same block. So it's one of my favorite things ever. And, you know, I've been sharing recently on social media that like my work is going to be evolving a lot in the next 6 to 12 months, and that I'm going to be branching out and kind of broadening and speaking to other topics. So I was really happy to be able to turn Single and Slaying It into a course that people can enroll in, you know, and participate in at home on their own time, because it's something that I will probably not be offering as a coaching, you know, program in the future. So I was very happy to kind of be able to put a pin in it and be like, here, you want to do this work? Like, nothing's stopping you.
Oh, that sounds like an incredible program. And
Thanks.
I can't wait to look into it a little bit more. It looks awesome.
Appreciate it.
So last question, if anybody wants to learn more about you, where can they connect with you?
Yeah. So my, I'm most active, I guess, on Instagram, probably, right? I'm on Instagram stories almost every day. My handle is at Amy Young Co. If you want to check me out, Amy Young CO. If you want to learn more about my work or look at, like my workshops or offerings, or check out my videos and podcast episodes, you can go to amyyoungcoaching.com and just find a whole slew of information and stuff to dig into there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Amy, for sharing your personal journey to self-love and the steps that we can take to create a solid foundation so that we're attracting the right love and relationship into our lives.
Thank you. I really appreciate, the questions that you asked, and this is such a lovely conversation.
Thank you. I'm Jessica, and thanks for tuning in today to Love Unplugged, the podcast. If there are any questions or topics you'd love answered on the show, head on over to www.projectloveco.com and share your request with me. If you haven't yet, go to iTunes and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast and share it with a loved one. Your feedback means the world to me, and the community we've created is what fuels our discussions here. After all, this is all for you. Join me next time for another unplugged conversation.